In this lesson, we'll talk about vector displacement maps and how we can use those to recreate high-resolution detail on our model. So to start, we're just going to create a new scene here, and I want to just use a plane. So I've just got a simple plane dropped in, and I've subdivided it a few times so that we can look at this. Now there are actually a few vector displacement maps that come with Mudbox, and so we can use those as kind of an example to see what the effect of this is going to be. And so if we take a look under stamps, you can see we have a number of these really colorful images at the end. These are our vector displacement maps, and we also have a couple under stencils. Okay, and what these vector displacement maps will do is allow us to get more detail along either our stroke, or if we're using as a stencil, get more detail with undercuts and directionality with our points than we would be able to get with something like the black and white or color maps. Okay, so if we were to get, bring one of these stamps in, we can kind of come in and we can create detail that is raised up from the surface. Okay, if we come in here with something that is something like these lines, you can see we can raise that straight up off of the surface. Now if we get something like these vector displacement maps and come in and start to use these as a stamp, and let's go ahead and dial our strength up, you can see that we're actually getting a little bit of an undercut there. Okay, if we look at some of these, it becomes a little bit more apparent. You can see where that's kind of bulging out, where it kind of comes out and then back in. So we're getting more information in here than we would get otherwise. Okay, you can come in here and do that. You can see you can really start to get some nice shapes. So these are very simple. If we take a look at our stencils, we can start to see this in a more dramatic way. So we'll take a look at these two. Let's get this one, which kind of is this scaly type of a pattern. And so I'll go ahead and put this over here on the side. And let me get my sculpt. We'll turn the stamp off, turn our strength all the way up. And now if I just paint through this, you can see there's a lot of detail in there. And the detail is not just raised straight up off of the surface. These are actually they have a bit of directionality to them. So we actually have some undercuts here, and you can see how these scales are kind of overlapping one another. That's the kind of detail that we can recreate by using this vector displacement map. Now next to this, there's also one that's this sort of swirl shape. And it doesn't look like much because when we look at our vector displacement maps, we're only able to see a portion of the information that is within that map. With some of these other maps, you can see kind of exactly what that's going to look like. Here we just kind of get an indication because we can't look at it all at once. And so let's go ahead and sculpt through this, and you can see that actually this map contains all the information that we need to recreate this ear that we sculpted. Okay, that has been sculpted. All right, so we can see we've got the undercuts, and all of that detail is contained within that vector displacement map. And again, Mudbox provides those these two for you, and then also the stamps that you can create some really nice seams with those. All right, so let's take a look at how we can create our own vector displacement maps from the detail that we sculpt. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this plane. So let's delete that plane, and let's create a new plane to use as a base. Let's subdivide it again a few times. Okay, and I'm going to just go get Sculpt, and I'm going to turn on mirroring in the X, and I want to create just a little bit of detail to add to the spine of our dinosaur. And so the detail, the kind of detail that we add, it's not really important. You can add some sort of a vertebrate type shape if you want, but really just use this as an opportunity to add some detail that sort of conforms with what we're doing here with our vector displacement, so it'll have a little bit of an undercut and so forth. So let me just go in and start to shape this. Let me get a larger brush, dial my strength down a little bit, start to shape this out. I'll bring this forward and in. You can go ahead and smooth part of that out if you want. Okay, maybe this sort of comes out here. I just want to create this basic shape first, and I want to raise it up a little bit. You can be pretty loose with this. Okay, something like that, where we've got this sort of open end in the back and then a piece sticking out in the front. All right, just kind of raise this up so the high point is back here. Now I'm going to come in with the wax tool here. Start to come across this and just real quickly add some detail in here. Okay, you can start to come around and form this into something that is a little bit more organic. Okay, we can go back to Sculpt and start to get some of those stamps that we looked at. So maybe get that last one. This will allow it to come in and start to cut in certain areas. And we really want to start to get those undercuts in so that we can see, get a good example of the kind of detail that we can create with these vector displacement maps. Okay, and we want it to blend sort of back down into the surface as well, though. Could kind of come in here and create some detail up on the top. Okay, go ahead and turn that stamp off, and with Control, just come in and start to create some holes down here underneath to really emphasize that, the ability to get that undercut in there. And just have a little fun with it, coming in and adding a little bit of detail in here. Okay, you can come in here and add a little bit more undercut underneath here. And we can do the same thing back here. Kind of push that in. Okay, and go back and get our stamp once again. Add a little bit of detail to that. Now we can also add some sort of surface detail to this if we want to. If we want to kind of get our, let's go get our spray. And we can grab some of these, one of these regular stamps that we've got here. Dial our brush size up a little bit. Okay, we can start to drop some surface detail in here. And that we can still pick that up in our vector displacement map as well. Not just the raised areas. Okay. Come back in here and emphasize some of these areas a little bit more and sharpen up some of those spots. Maybe we want to add some little bumps here, so we take our strength down. If we turn off our mirroring, we can make that so it's not so symmetrical. Alright. And so we just spend a little time working on this. We don't need to make it perfect. So we just want to kind of see this as an example. But let me just kind of cut these in a little bit more so it's really clear. Those are cut in underneath. Alright, so we end up with maybe something like that. Okay, again, really simple. But the next thing we need to do is to actually calculate our vector displacement from this. Now, we could go down to the lowest level, but you can see that if we try to calculate it, that lowest level's been altered because of the sculpting that we've done. So what I actually want to do is bring in a new plane. So let's create a new plane. And we can look at the UVs for our plane. You can see those here. So that's just a flat plane. We don't need to subdivide it. We can rename it if we want to call this target. And we can name our original plane, if we want to, call it source. And now all we have to do is to create our vector displacement map. So to do this, we're going to touch on something that we will go into more depth on a little bit later, and that's going to be under Maps, Extract Texture Map. So let's go to New Operation. Now you'll have some choices here, and we'll talk about these again later, but we want to go to Vector Displacement Map. We want to choose for our target. We want to choose the target. Okay, our target's going to be at level 0. For our source, we'll have the source, and our source is going to be at the highest level. All right. And so the subdivision, or the vector displacement, only uses the subdivision algorithm, so we don't have to worry about those settings. That will make a little bit more sense later on when we go in and start to make our maps. We can choose the size of the image. I'll just leave that at 1K, but you can make that a bit larger if you want. For this vector displacement map options, we're going to be using this to sculpt on our model, so we want to leave this on relative tangent. rather than if we're going to use this to actually recreate detail on a model, like outputting a displacement map. So now we can choose a file name. So we go into the project files here, and we can choose these different options. I'm going to go ahead and save this as an OpenEXR, and we'll call this spine and save it. Now it's going to tell us that if we want to use this as a stamp or stencil, we have to have this _VDM, and so do we want to add it? We'll say yes, we do want to add that. Alright, so now all we have to do is go ahead and say extract. It's going to go through the process. That map extraction has finished. Now we'll jump into our image browser, and we can see the image that we've created. Just refresh our image here, and so you can see the detail that we've created here in our vector displacement map. It doesn't look like much, but if we go ahead and hit the plus and minus, we can cycle through this and see a little bit more of that detail. So you can see we can only see parts of it at one time, but there is a lot of information within that vector displacement map. We just can't really see it all at once. So now let's see how we can actually use this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file, and we'll save it with your project files. So we'll go to Save As, and we'll save this with Lesson 6, and we'll just call this something like Spine Sculpt, just so we have that available. So now let's go ahead and open up our dinosaur. So let's open up Lesson 06 Start. And now we want to use the map that we created to actually create some detail on the back of our dinosaur. So with our dinosaur selected, let's actually create a new sculpt layer to put our spine detail onto. Alright, and we'll go to our image browser. We want to drop this over, and instead of as a stencil, let's drop it over as a stamp. Okay, and now I want to go ahead and use this stamp. We'll jump back and use this to actually sculpt. Now let's go ahead and try just the default settings here and see what that is going to look like. So let me go ahead and take the strength up, and I want to leave mirroring off. So now if I come up to the back of the head and start to pull this in, you can see it's not really, we're not really getting the individual copies of this. So I want to increase the stamp spacing. Let's go ahead and increase that to 100 and see what that looks like. So now it's popping each one of those in there. Okay, I actually want to go ahead and take the build up all the way up, and that will allow us to see this. Now you can see that it is oriented that way. If I want to kind of rotate that around, I can flip it this way, and now I get that sort of a look. Okay, we can also get our steady stroke to help us come in here and create a nice straight line. Now if that's the spacing is too far, we can take our distance down on that so that they are overlapping a little bit, and then we just want to pull those down along the spine, and so we get something like that. Okay, since we have that on a sculpt layer, if you want to dial that in a little bit, you can see how we can real quickly reproduce some complex detail here, and the look of it is not that important. Just the fact that we've got these undercuts and we've got this detail that we've added, when we've been able to create that so that we can reproduce it at any time using the vector displacement map that we built. So make sure to check out vector displacement maps. You can use those not only to recreate the detail for your actual whole model, but you can actually create, as we've done, kind of reproducible parts that you can come in and put onto your models if you're going to be doing something over and over again. And again, check out the ones that come with Mudbox and see if you can integrate those into your workflow as well. You get some great results with those. Okay, so now that we've looked at vector displacement maps, let's go ahead and in the next lesson take a look at materials and textures. So we'll go ahead and talk about those next.